The world's on fire and I am tired. Let's talk about that. Good mythical morning. I got a fantastically depressing and exhausting show for you today. And so before we jump into it, while you hit that like and or subscribe button, you should know that after today's show, you should go to youtube.com/ACW and watch my brand new podcast with the fantastic Call Me Chris. She's blown up over the past year with now 27 million plus followers on TikTok, growing really everywhere. Had a fantastic time. I think you'll love her too. Check it out, youtube.com/ACW. But with that said, welcome back to the Philip DeFranco Show. Not good mythical morning. He was lying. But yeah, let's just jump into it. And the first thing that we should talk about today is that Jake Paul has now responded to the sexual assault allegation that was levied against him last week, denying that it ever happened. That accusation, of course, coming from TikToker Justine Paradise, saying that this happened back in 2019. Right after this, for several days, Jake didn't respond to this. He just kept posting on social media, seemingly ignoring the claim. But yesterday we ended up seeing his attorney responding to the allegations, saying in a statement to TMZ, while others have already begun to debunk the claim alleged against him, our client categorically denies the allegation and has every intention of aggressively disproving it and pursuing legal action against those responsible for the defamation of his character. Jake Paul then putting out a statement himself on Twitter, saying that this is a topic that he takes seriously and her claim is 100% false, adding, "Not only have I never had any sexual relationship with this individual, but this claim is solely a manufactured accusation and a blatant attempt for attention during a highly visible fight week," with him also saying that he will pursue legal action and continuing, "This individual is directly using the attention from her social media posts and video to promote her adult content website and Amazon shopping list," and adding, "At the time of her story, I was in a relationship, and as someone who was a mama's boy growing up, I respect women and mothers more than anything. I most certainly have never laid a finger on a girl without their consent. I will fight this to the end to prove my innocence. This isn't the first preposterous allegation made against me in my career, and it most likely won't be the last," with him ultimately closing by saying that dealing with liars, fake news, and false accusations is part of his job and he won't back down. Following all of that, we saw Justine herself responding in an Instagram story criticizing his statement, writing, "I wasn't even aware that I still had an Amazon wish list. I just checked and there were literally 6 items on it. I am not looking for gifts or money. I made it very clear that all I wanted from him was an apology and for him to stop doing this to people," with her also claiming that a minor came forward to her who also had a similar experience with Jake, with her then thanking the people who have stuck up for her. You also saw the likes of Julia Halbanel, who describes herself as a personal trainer, a gym instructor, a financial dominatrix, responding to Jake Paul's statement in an Instagram story saying, "Never touched a girl without consent? Crazy, not what I heard from a friend's experience with you." And that is ultimately where we are with this story. We have to wait and see what other developments we're gonna see. Is there any more evidence? Are there other stories? And well, definitely we've seen a lot of people throwing out their opinions on this, saying this person's lying, this person's lying. One of the interesting conversations and debates that's popped up is Jake Paul and his team pursuing legal action. You have people here that think that Jake is telling the truth, that she is lying, saying yes, that's exactly what he needs to do. Go after her legally. Make an example out of someone that is making a false claim, because false claims hurt actual victims. But on the other side of this, you have people saying, no, Jake Paul's denial is BS. He is lying. This young woman bravely is telling the truth, even though she knew she was going to get kind of piled on. And this is an act of legal and monetary intimidation by an abuser to his victim. And so while we wait to see what happens from a legal standpoint, what stories come out, what evidence comes out, I do want to pass a question off to you. What are your thoughts on this whole situation right now? And specifically regarding the legal action that's being talked about here. What camp do you land in? Are you somewhere in the middle? I'd love to know. And then we should talk about a big update around the death of Daunte Wright, who of course was shot and killed by a police officer in Minneapolis on Sunday. With the big news today being that Kim Potter, who shot and killed Daunte Wright, has now been arrested and charged with second-degree manslaughter. A charge that in Minnesota carries a maximum penalty of 10 years in prison and a $20,000 fine. Now obviously we're gonna have to wait and see what happens with all of this, and every situation is different, but in a New York Times review of what people have referred to as a weapon confusion case, right, the chief of police saying that it appeared that Kim Potter thought she had the taser, she shouted taser, 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 actually shot Daunte with a gun. In the New York Times review of those 15 cases, they found that the police shooting people were only indicted 5 times, with 3 getting convicted. But, you know, the news of this charge just coming out now, and we're gonna have to wait to see what happens next. But from that, let's pay some bills and thank the fantastic sponsor of today's show, June Shine. And if you didn't know, June Shine is a hard kombucha made with real organic ingredients with surprisingly low sugar. Started by a team of artists and creatives, June Shine is the better for you alcohol that's refreshing, gluten-free, and easy on the digestive system thanks to the probiotics probiotics. Their midnight painkiller flavor has hundreds of 5-star reviews and is 6% alcohol. Though the new chili mango is easily my favorite, though you can never go wrong with the classic blood orange mint either. Really appreciate the not feeling so incredibly full after drinking a few, still feeling fine the next morning. Juneshine uses green tea and honey instead of malted grains and sugar for a smoother, less acidic taste. They kind of consider themselves the champagne of kombucha. Juneshine is one of the only, if not the only hard kombucha that delivers nationwide, and it's only $2 per can with their bestseller 18-pack. So what are you waiting for? Go to juneshine.com/DeFranco and use code DeFranco to get Juneshine's best-selling 18-pack for 20% off plus free shipping. And seriously, even if you're not a kombucha drinker, I haven't been, try it, trust me. And then we should definitely talk about this new report from the U.S. Capitol Police Inspector General. The report is titled Review of the Events Surrounding the January 6, 2021 Takeover of the U.S. Capitol. It's 104 pages and has been described by the New York Times as, quote, the most searing portrait yet of the lapses and miscalculations around the most violent attack on the Capitol in 2 centuries. And according to the outlets who viewed the publication, the Inspector General found that Capitol Police had more clear advance warnings about the attack than were previously known to the public. This including explicit intelligence about the potential for violence, warning that Congress itself is the target. In fact, the police department's own intelligence unit warned 3 days before that the Trump supporters, spurred on by his false election claims, were targeting Congress and could become violent. Those concerns were also relayed to USCP by an FBI field office, as was a warning from the Department of Homeland Security that the agency had found a map of tunnels that run under the Capitol on pro-Trump message boards. But despite that, the watchdog reportedly found that when an operations plan was written, police leaders included, quote, no specific known threats related to the joint session of Congress. Beyond that, the report also allegedly found that when the mob did reach the Capitol, USCP leadership directed a special crowd control unit not to use some of its most effective crowd control techniques, which prevented them from containing the mob. And in addition to all of that, the officers were also given defective protective equipment and expired ammunition. Right, and all of this is incredibly significant because while the Capitol Police have long been accused of not being properly prepared, this report is the clearest and most in-depth piece of information so far on how big the failures were. And as for what happens next, you had the watchdog reportedly listing more than a dozen recommendations, including new training, addressing communication failures, and centralizing intel, with some lawmakers from both sides saying that they hope to use the report's findings to better secure the Capitol. But given the polarizing nature of increased security among Republican leaders who fought to remove security, which resulted in another attack that left one officer dead, it's unclear what will happen. And then we should definitely talk about today, President Biden announcing that he will withdraw all American troops from Afghanistan by the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks that of course drew the United States into its longest war. And this decision comes as Biden is nearing the May 1st deadline set under the February 2020 peace deal by the Trump administration to bring the troops home from the war. A war that has killed nearly 2,400 troops, injured or killed nearly 100,000 civilians, and cost about $2 trillion. Now with all of this, Biden had previously said that it would be hard to meet the date after taking office, but even with the extended timeline, many experts and defense officials have warned against this move. Where the U.S. first entered the war to oust the Taliban government, which was harboring al-Qaeda militants involved in planning the 9/11 attacks, the Taliban was removed within months, but the group still had support in parts of the country and steadily regained territory and strength. And now, almost 2 decades later, the group is the strongest that it's been since the 2001 invasion, and in fact, according to reports, it has influence or control over half the country. And what's more, the situation has gotten worse in recent months after Trump, during his last week in office, reduced the official number of troops in Afghanistan to 2,500, which is the lowest level since 2001. As the U.S. has scaled down its operations, the Taliban has taken control over major highways, tried to cut off cities and towns in surges that have exhausted Afghan security forces. Violence has also ramped up in recent months. In fact, according to a UN report released just today, nearly 1,800 civilians were killed or wounded in the first 3 months of the year, which is a nearly 30% increase from the same period last year. Now, as far as what this will mean for the U.S. domestically, U.S. intelligence agencies have said that they do not believe that al-Qaeda or other terrorist organizations present an immediate threat to strike the U.S. from Afghanistan. And while reportedly that assessment has played a big role in Biden's decision to withdraw U.S. forces, many experts are now more concerned about how the move will impact Afghanistan and its citizens. In fact, the Pentagon has warned against removing American troops from the region until Afghan security forces, which the U.S. has been funding and training for the last 2 decades, can effectively fight back against the Taliban. So, as a result, critics of the plan have argued that the withdrawal will leave the forces, which have limited capabilities and resources, totally in the dust. Beyond that, many also worry that this move could undermine the entire goal of the 2001 invasion in two different ways. First, because the Taliban has let al-Qaeda operatives remain in the country who could become emboldened once the US troops leave. And second, because some experts and Afghan politicians have said that withdrawing from the country without a solid peace deal in place, it could very well just end up with concentrating more power in the hands of the Taliban. Right after a long delay following the US agreement in February of last year, peace talks between the Afghan government and the Taliban finally started up in September, but those talks have since stalled partly due to Biden's win and the anticipation of a possible change in policy under the new administration. While other countries have recently made moves to restart the talks, there are a number of possible options on the table and nothing is set in stone. And you have American commanders who have long said that a peace deal with the Taliban is the best security measure for the US, have argued that the US will need to use the promise of withdrawing their forces as a condition for a good deal. But now they would see this as the US taking a major bargaining chip off the table, causing concerns that if a deal is struck, the already weakened Afghan government will make key concessions to the Taliban. That, in turn, has promoted many Afghan citizens who oppose the Taliban to worry that if the group secures a role in a power-sharing agreement, it could eventually take over the government, and then reimpose the harsh rule that it imposed before the US removed it in 2001, particularly on women who were basically barred from public life. And so with this announcement, we've seen a lot of political backlash, in fact, from both sides, though particularly from Republicans like Lindsey Graham, who said, "It is insane to withdraw at this time given the conditions that exist on the ground in Afghanistan," and adding a full withdrawal from Afghanistan is dumber than dirt and devilishly dangerous. President Biden will have, in essence, canceled an insurance policy against another 9/11. But on the other side, we've seen Democrats arguing that the US presence in the region is just not helping. And if we base removal on condition-based approaches, we will never leave. With many arguing that the plan is actually careful and will still emphasize diplomatic efforts in the region while simultaneously removing the US from a highly unpopular and expensive war. This, including the likes of Chuck Schumer, who praised the plan today, saying, "The president doesn't want endless wars. I don't want endless wars, and neither do the American people." And it's refreshing to have a thought-out plan with a set timetable instead of the president waking up one morning, getting out of bed, saying what just pops into his head, and then having the generals having walked it back. Now, as far as how leaders in Afghanistan have responded, the country's president tweeted today that he had spoken to Biden and emphasized that the two nations would continue to work together, and adding Afghanistan's proud security and defense forces are fully capable of defending its people and country, which they have been doing all along. But at the same time, the Taliban has focused more on the fact that the initial timeline has been delayed, with the spokesperson saying, "We are not agreeing with delay after May 1st. Any delay after May 1st is not acceptable for us." So right now, it is unclear how that stance might affect the situation, especially when it comes to peace deal negotiations. And while obviously with this story, we're gonna have to wait and see what happens. I mean, there are big concerns for what's gonna happen in the Middle East this year. And this because according to the US intelligence community's annual threat assessment report that was released yesterday, ongoing conflicts, economic crises, and the fallout from COVID-19 will likely destabilize several countries in the Middle East in 2021 and could even put some on the brink of collapse. And according to the report, as noted by Axios, Iran will take risks that could escalate tensions and threaten US and allied interests in the coming year, but will attempt to avoid a direct conflict due to concerns about the US response. Sparring between Iran and rivals in the region will continue. In Iraq, the government will continue to struggle to fight ISIS and to control Iran-backed Shiite militias. In Libya, the interim unity government will face enduring political, economic, and security challenges that will make reconciliation very difficult. And in Syria, the crisis will continue for years to come, and President Bashar al-Assad will struggle to reestablish control over the entire country. And ultimately, with this story, and honestly, anything that stood out to you today, I'd love to know your thoughts in those comments down below, because this is the end of the video. As always, thank you for watching, liking, subscribe, and all the good stuff. If you're looking for more to watch right now, I got you covered with that brand new podcast with Call Me Chris, or maybe just missed yesterday's show, you want to catch up, click right there or in the top description. But with that said, of course, as always, my name's Philip DeFranco. You've just been filled in. I love yo faces, and I'll see you tomorrow.